So Alison is here today. She's a full-time scholar and practitioner of magic. She's the proprietor of Practical Occult, where she sells pentacles and other enchanted items drawn from her study of ancient arts. And today she's going to give us a little bit of a run through on how to do some of these talismans and how to do the spell for Helios, which I'm very, very, very much looking forward to. Now, for the sake of this talk, Alison had some handouts to provide, which I'm going to put now in the chat box for you. Now this is only going to take a second. Now, please let me know if you can see the Spell to Helios handouts, the PDF, which should be available for everybody to see. Excellent, thank you. So Alison will take questions at the end of the talk, if that's okay. There will be ample time for it. And she kindly accepted that screenshots may be taken of her slides. So Alison, thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Hi, I'm Alison Chicosky, and I'm here to talk to you today about solar syncretism in the Greek magical papyri, focusing on PGM-4, 1596 to 1715, the Consecration for all purposes, spell to Helios. Though the ancient Egyptians had many gods, the worship of the sun god was of major importance from the earliest periods until the rise of Christianity. Worshipped under many forms and names, the sun god was also linked to other gods, both Egyptian and foreign. By late antiquity, Egyptian magic was being written in Greek, and from the surviving texts, we can see that Egyptian synchronization being applied to the Greek gods. This consecration invokes Helios-Zeus-Sarapis as greatest god and world ruler, and calls on the sun god in 12 animal forms associated with 12 hours, requesting powers be granted to a magical stone or amulet. This presentation will explore the historical context of the solar animal forms by comparison with art history and excerpts from a PGM-era astrologer. Attendees will also learn practical uses of this spell as an item consecration and a personal empowerment. Terminology in this presentation. Barbarous names. These were the names that the foreigners called the gods. In this presentation, you'll see some words that have not yet been translated definitively. They have been left as they appear in Betts's edition of the Greek Magical Papyri. In the handouts, there is a link where author Baal Kadmon has kindly made a YouTube video with pronunciation. Charitation, a class of spells that request favor, love, success, and basically all of the good stuff. So knowing that term will help you if you want to find out more about this when searching through academic texts. Dodeca-oros, from dodeca, 12, and hora, hour. The dodeca-oros is an astrological system based on 12 symbolic animals, each one representing a form of the sun when approaching a particular constellation and sign of the zodiac. Paranatalanta, a star or constellation that rises at the same time as another, specifically one that rises at the same time as a constellation of the zodiac. Phylactery, a protective charm or amulet, based on the Greek root word phylax, which means guard. The Greek Magical Papyri. The spell to Helios references a 4th century Egyptian text included in the Greek Magical Papyri. The Greek Magical Papyri also known as the Papyri Graecae Magicae, PGM for short, is an edited collection of various magical texts from Egypt and late antiquity. The texts of the PGM range from 100 BCE to 400 CE, but the papyri that contains the specific spell to Helios is estimated between 300 and 350 CE. Spells of the PGM range from simple folk magic to complicated rituals. The spell we will be discussing today can be performed with easily acquired materials like incense and a candle. Many spells draw on Hebrew, Egyptian, and Greek deities and magical names in the same spell. This spell references the sun god Helios, syncretized with Zeus-Sarapis, the solar aspect of one of the most prominent gods of Greco-Roman Egypt. This text is currently owned by the National Library of France after being purchased from the collection of Giovanni Anastasi in 1857. Tomb robbing had been an issue in Egypt for thousands of years, and the known history of many Egyptian artifacts unfortunately starts with them being acquired from collectors. Therefore, nothing is known of the setting in which this was found. However, as you can see in this photo, the text was very well preserved and is completely intact. If you were to zoom in, the handwriting is also very legible, making this an excellent spell to examine. Before we discuss the spell, we should first seek to understand how the ancient Egyptians conceptualized magic, or Heka, and how that may differ from modern conceptions. Magic, in the sense of Heka, means an all-pervading coercive power, comparable to the laws of nature in its coerciveness and all-pervadingness, by which in the beginning the world was made, by which it is daily maintained, and by which mankind is ruled. Magic, in the sense of a particular discourse, is much more specific. It refers to the exertion of the same coercive power in the personal sphere. From Magic and Theology in Ancient Egypt by Jan Asman. This particular definition of Heka is expressed beautifully in the PGM text we'll be discussing today. The praises sung to the sun god would not be out of place in an Egyptian religious rite, but the opening paragraph makes it clear that this is a spell to enchant an amulet with various boons. I invoke you, the greatest God, eternal Lord, world ruler, you who are over the world and under the world, mighty ruler of the sea, rising at dawn, shining from the east for the whole world, setting in the west. Come to me, you who rises from the four winds, joyous Agathos daimon, for whom heaven has become the processional way. I call upon your holy and great hidden names, which you rejoice to hear. The earth flourished when you shone forth, and the plants became fruitful when you laughed. The animals begot their young when you permitted. Give glory and honor and favor and fortune and power to this phylactery, which I consecrate today for Alison Chicosky. I invoke you, the greatest in heaven, the great God, the shining Helios, giving light throughout the whole world. You are the great serpent, leader of all the gods, who control the beginning of Egypt and the end of the whole inhabited world, who mate in the ocean. You are he who becomes visible each day and sets in the northwest of heaven and rises in the southeast. The sun god being invoked in the specific spell to Helios may be called by a Greek name, and the spell is written in Greek, but the references in the spell indicate the roots of the spell lie in Egyptian cosmology, from the descriptions of the sun god as creator to the changing forms that will come up later in the text. As J. Feliciano notes in the Agathos Daimon in Greco-Egyptian religion, the symbolism found within seems to involve elements from the Tebtunis cosmogony, solar Egyptian theology, and presents Agathodaimon Helios as a ruler and vivifier of the world and its inhabitants. The earth flourished when you shone forth, and the plants became fruitful when you laughed. The animals begot their young when you permitted. Later, the text draws directly on the creation myth by referring to him as the great serpent who mate in the ocean, in an obvious reference to Pishai vivifying the primeval abyss. Additionally, the laughter of the sun god as a part of creation appears in the cosmology of Esna and in PGM 13, 343 to 646, commonly known as the Eighth Book of Moses. We've already seen Helios being syncretized with Agathos diamond and Pishai. Later in the spell, we'll see Zeus-Sarapis and a series of 12 animal forms, many of whom are associated with Egyptian deities that are also frequently syncretized with Ra. But what do scholars mean when they discuss the syncretization of deities? When seeking to understand the syncretic union of deities in Egypt, Hans Bonnet uses the term inhabiting. The formula Amun-Ra does not signify that Amun is the same as Ra or that one god has merged into the other. It simply observes that Ra is in Amun, but not in such a way that both would be indissociably attached to each other and could exist only in partnership. No inhabiting is permanent. The partners can separate again and be manifest independently. Myths, like the celestial bodies, are also in motion. There are story arcs where the fortunes of heroes and gods rise and fall. Characters can have entirely separate stories, with partial arcs or scenes that end up almost overlapping. The ubiquitous nature of creation myths makes it easy for those stories to overlap at certain points. From the Middle Kingdom onward, the syncretistic solarization of other gods by calling them name Ra is attested. This tendency increases over the course of history until every male main deity of a city or village can take on this role. From the Soul of the Sun Permeates the Whole World by Alexander von Leven. When we turn our eyes to the stars, we can see that the journeys in these myths are also written in the sky. Let's take a look at the animal forms of Helios in this particular spell. In the first hour, you have the form of a cat. Give glory and honor to this phylactery. In the second hour, you have the form of a dog. Give strength and honor to this phylactery. In the third hour, you have the form of a serpent. Give honor to the god. In the fourth hour, you have the form of a scarab. Mightily strengthen this phylactery in this night for the work which it is consecrated. In the fifth hour, you have the form of a donkey. Give strength and courage and power to the god. In the sixth hour, you have the form of a lion, the ruler of time. Give success to this phylactery and glorious victory. In the seventh hour, you have the form of a goat. Give sexual charm to this phylactery. In the eighth hour, you have the form of a bull who becomes visible everywhere. Let all things done by the use of this phylactery be accomplished. In the ninth hour, you have the form of a falcon. The lotus emerged from the abyss. Give success and good luck to this phylactery. In the 10th hour, you have the form of a baboon. In the 11th hour, you have the form of an ibis. Protect this phylactery for lucky use by Alison Chicosky from the present day for all time. In the 12th hour, you have the form of a crocodile. You who have set at evening as an old man, who are over the world and under the world, mighty ruler of the sea, hear my voice in this night, holy hours, and let all things done by this phylactery be brought to fulfillment, and especially let it protect Alison Chicosky, for which I consecrate it. Please, Lord, I conjure earth and heaven and light and darkness and the great God who created all, you, Agathon Daemonian, the helper, to accomplish for me everything done by the use of this phylactery. The one Zeus is Serapis. The representation of the sun in different forms has a long history in Egypt, though the number of forms and forms varied. Some of these representations use separate figures for the other forms, like we see in the Litany of the Sun, the original title of which is Book of Venerating Ra in the West, which lists 75 different shapes of the sun god and dates from around 1425 BCE. As we will see later in this presentation, sometimes the alternate forms of the sun god were represented with one body and multiple heads. But what is the significance of these changing forms? Iamblichus explains in De Mysteris Egyptorum. Iamblichus speaks about the Dodecaurus in his De Mysteris Egyptorum, where he explains that the animal forms are symbolic representations of the sun's different powers. Furthermore, he asserts that the changing of form does not affect the sun, which is immutable, but is the result of different effects of its benefits to the recipients. In these, the symbolic mode of signification is shown, indicating with discourses that the sun is in configuration according to the zodiac signs and changes his forms every hour. It indicates his immutable, stable, never failing, unique, collective largesse to the whole cosmos. Changes of form and configuration reside in the recipients. For this reason, they say that the sun is changing according to the zodiac sign and the hour. From Master Sync, the Dodecaurus, Magical Papyri, and Magical Gems. I'm sure everyone here has heard of the zodiac, but what did Iamblichus mean by the hour? This brings us to Teucer the Babylonian for further explanation. Through Teucer the Babylonian's books could be acquired many things more than beautiful, and through these zodiacal signs, which are in the sky, and by the stars rising together with each of them, and through the so-called decans, obtaining resources of all kinds in different issues. Michael Sellos. Teucer the Babylonian. He's also known as Teucer of Babylon. The exact period of time he lived is unknown. Historian Franz Boll suggests he lived in the 1st century CE. Wolfgang Hübner believes that he lived no later than the 1st century BCE, but either way puts Teucer contemporary with the Greek magical papyri. None of Teucer's work survives, as far as we know, but he's mentioned by Porphyry, Michael Sellos, and Rhetorius. Though, according to James Holden, who translated a copy of Rhetorius's work that quotes Teucer actually intermingles information from Ptolemy's Tetrabiblos, so keep that in mind. Excerpts of Teucer are contained in 2 codices, Vindobonensis, Philosos, and Berolinensis, 173. The Vindobonensis from the 15th century contains a chapter called About the 12 Signs of the Oblique Circle, according to the Saracen philosopher Teucer the Babylonian. Teucer's Dodecaurus. Teucer wrote about the Sphera Barbarica, or sky map of the foreigners, of the late Hellenistic period, which has been described by Gary David Thompson as an eclectic mixture of the Egyptian sphere, elements of Babylonian astronomy, constellations described by Ptolemy, and the star map of the Romans. German author Franz Boll reconstructed Teucer's system from a combination of several literary sources and 2 astrological charts. His conclusion was that Teucer's system combined in the Para Natalanta 2 different systems, one in which the Para Natalanta were related to the decans, and the other in which they were related to the zodiac. In the first hour, we have the form of a cat, granting glory and favor, which Teucer places in Aries. This, of course, brings to mind Ra assuming the form of a cat to defeat Apophis, who would otherwise prevent sunrise. With its first decan, there arise Athena and the tail of the whale, and the third part of the triangle, and the cyanocephalus bearing torches, and the head of the cat of the dodecaoros. With the second decan, there arise Andromeda and the central part of the whale, and the Gorgon and Perseus's harp sword, and half of the triangle and the central part of the cat of dodecaoros. With the third decan, there arise Cassiopeia sitting on the throne, and Perseus upside down, and the head of the whale, and the rest of the triangle, and the tail of the cat of the dodecaoros. In the second hour, we have the form of a dog granting strength and honor, which Teucer places in Taurus. With its first decan, there arise Orion, armed with a sword, and half of the Pleiades, and half of the remains of the dead woman, and the head of the dog of the dodecaoros. With the second decan, there arise the Cyanocephalus, holding a naked statue, and the scepter, and the other half of the remains of the dead woman, and the central part of the dog of the dodecaoros. With the third decan, there arise the team of horses, and the auriga, and the chariot, and the goat raised by the auriga with the left hand, and the back of the dog of the dodecaoros. In the third hour, we have the form of a serpent who grants honor. On a Roman era artifact called the Cairo Zodiac or Tabula de Russi, which we will see on a later slide, that features the animals of the dodecaoros next to their respective zodiac signs, the serpent of Gemini wears a crown and sports a beard, identifying it as the Agathos diamond. Gemini. With the first decan, there arise the auriga and the chariot, and the wheel under the chariot, and the front half of the dog, and the head of the serpent of dodecaoros. With the second decan, there arise the lyre and Hercules, and the snake on the tree, chased by Hercules, and the central part of the serpent of dodecaoros. With the third decan, there arise the lyre and the dog star, Sirius, and the dolphin, and the front of the little bear, and the back of the serpent of dodecaoros. In the fourth hour, we have the form of a scarab that mightily strengthens the phylactery. Teucer has identified this with Cancer. With its first decan, there arise the back of Ursa Minor, and the satyr touching the club, and the muse playing the lyre, and one of the graces, and the head of the scarab of the dodecaoros. With the second decan, there arise half of the manger, and the donkey, and the second of the graces, and the central part of the scarab of the dodecaoros. With the third decan, there arise the third of graces, and the other donkey, and the other half of the manger, and the final part of the scarab of dodecaoros. In the fifth hour, we have a donkey that grants strength, courage, and power, which Teucer has associated with Leo. With its first decan, there arise the one with a dog face shooting with the bow, and the half of the ship, and the head of the dodecaoros. With the second decan, there arise the other half of the ship, and a god stretching out his hand upwards, and the back of the hydra, and the cup and cymbals, and the Phrygians' flutes, and the central part of the donkey of dodecaoros. With the third decan, there arise the auriga holding the wheel, and the boy following him, and the central part of the hydra, and the back of the donkey of dodecaoros. In the sixth hour, we have the form of a lion that rules time, which reminds me of the Leontocephalus depiction of the Ion. Virgo. With its first decan, there arises a goddess seated on a throne and nursing a baby, who some say is the goddess Isis in the atrium feeding Horos. There arise also the spike and the central part of the hydra, and the head of the fish, and the head of the lion of Dodeca-Oros. With the second decan, there arise the muse playing the lyre, and the central part of the fish, and the head of the lion of Dodeca-Oros. With the third decan, there rise the other half of Butes, and the other of the two halves of the plow, and the tail of the fish, and the spikes, and the tail of the lion of Dodeca-Oros. In the seventh hour, we have the form of a goat granting sexual charm, which Teucer has placed with Libra. With its first decan, there arise Hades, the unseen, and Musa playing the lyre, and the boatman, and part of the Acherusian lake, and part of the boat, and the head of the goat of the Dodeca-Oros. With the second decan, there arises the Auriga, and the young boy, and the front part of the centaur, and the central part of the boat, and Acherusian lake, and the spring, and the agora, and the central part of the goat of the Dodeca-Oros. With the third decan, there arise the back of the centaur, and the final part of the boat, and the Acherusian lake, and Ariadne lying down with his left hand on the head, an Ariadne crown with two heads in the sky, called the Queen and Adonis, calling the heaven, and the final part of the goat of the Dodeca-Oros. In the eighth hour, we have the form of a bull, and a request that all things done by the use of this phylactery be accomplished. Teucer has associated this with Scorpio. With its first decan, there arise Hygeia and the back of the centaur, and the front part of the bull of the Dodeca-Oros. With the second decan, there arise Asclepius, and the central part of the centaur, and the central part of the bull of the Dodeca-Oros. By the third decan, there arise the front part of the centaur, carrying the hare, and the front part of the dog, and Ophicus, and the back of the bull of the Dodeca-Oros. In the ninth hour, we have the form of a falcon who grants success and good luck, which Teucer has placed with Sagittarius. With its first decan, there arise a god lying upside down, which is called Talus, and a crow touches his head, and a dog turned backwards, and the head of the hawk of the Dodeca-Oros. With the second decan, there arise Cepheus, touching with his right hand the wolf, and the head of the wolf, and half of the Argos, and the front part of the dolphin, and the central part of the hawk of Dodeca-Oros. With the third decan, there arise the rest of the dolphin, and Pelagus, and half of the Big Dipper, and the tail of the hawk of the Dodeca-Oros. In the 10th hour, we have the form of a baboon, but there is no associated boon to grant. I believe, based on how well preserved the original papyrus is, and based on Teucer describing the dog-headed baboon, or cyanocephalus, as having an ominous or ill-omened name, that this was an intentional omission. Capricorn. With its first decan, there rise the other half of the Argos, and the Ursa Major, and the Nereid, and the Lyre, and the head of the big fish, and the front part of the cyanocephalus of the Dodeca-Oros. With the second decan, there arise Eileithia sitting on the throne, and the middle of the wheel, and of the vine, and the central part of the great fish, and the central part of the ominous one of the Dodeca-Oros. With its third decan, there rise the other half of the throne, and the tail of the big fish, and the altar, and the headless demon holding his own head, and the back of the ominous one of the Dodeca-Oros. In the 11th hour, we have the form of an ibis. In one version of the Hermopolis creation myth, the world began in a cosmic egg laid by an ibis. Teucer's placed this with Aquarius. With its first decan, there arise the river Eridanus, holding in hand the vase and the head of the centaurus, and his left hand outstretched, and the head of the ibis of Dodecaurus. With the second decan, there rise the central part of the centaur and two snakes in contact with each other, and the central part of the ibis of the Dodecaurus. With its third decan, there arise the great bird called Cygnus, called Centaur, and the wolf biting its right hand, and the back of Pegasus, and the final part of the ibis of Dodecaurus. In the 12th hour, we have the form of a crocodile, and like the baboon of the 10th hour, there is no associated request. The crocodile was once associated with Sobek. The crocodile was associated with Sobek, who was also known to be syncretized with Ra. Based once again on the completeness of the papyri, and also in light of how Sobek was sometimes viewed, it is my opinion that this is another intentional omission. According to J. Hill and Sobek, it seems likely that Sobek began as a dark god who had to be appeased, but that his protective qualities and his strength were valued when they were used in defense of the pharaoh and his people. Pisces. With the first decan, there rise the front part of the winged horse Pegasus, and the head of deer, which has two snakes in its nostrils, and the forepart of the linen thread, and the tail of the crocodile of Dodecaurus. With the second decan, there rise the central part of the deer, and half of the Engonison, and the central part of the crocodile of Dodecaurus. With the third decan, there arise the back of the deer, and the other half of Engonison, and the final part of linen thread, and the head of the crocodile of Dodecaurus. I mentioned two astrological charts in brief when discussing Frank Boll's reconstruction of the Dodecaurus. The first one is the Cairo zodiac, which is also known as the Tabula Daresi, after George Daresi, who found it in a Cairo market around the beginning of the 20th century. It is made of bronze and dates from the Roman imperial era. The outer ring depicts the zodiac, the middle ring, the Dodecaurus, and in the center, Helios, Selene, and a snake. The photo you're looking at is of a squeeze that was made from the object. A squeeze is a reverse impression made by applying moist filter paper, and it is far easier to see than the figures in the photos of the object. This is a redraw of the Cairo zodiac by Dallin Duke, so you can get an idea of what that looks like, because the squeeze is not very easy to see. The second chart is the Planisphaerium Bianchini, a marble table dated from the 3rd century Common Era that scholars believe was used for divination by throwing and also casting horoscopes. While extremely fragmented, we have enough of it to see what's going on in the sections. On the intact upper left corner, we have one of the 4 winds. The design contains the faces, which are kind of like the Greek decans, the Egyptian decans, a black band with the planetary influences, 2 rings containing the zodiac, a ring containing the Dodecaurus, and an inner circle with 2 bears and a snake. We also find the forms of the sun on magical gems. On the left gem, we see 4 solar figures enclosed in an Ouroboros: Harpocrates on a lotus, a baboon, a scarab, and a falcon. On the right gem, we see a bird in the center, surrounded by a winged serpent or dragon with a circle on its head, Harpocrates on a lotus, a falcon, and a crocodile. The second gem brings to mind PGM-2 64 to 183, an alternative spell for revelation. That spell goes, "You who have the sacred bird upon your robe in the eastern parts of the Red Sea, even as you have upon the northern parts, the figure of an infant child seated upon a lotus. O rising one, you of many names. On the southern parts, you have the shape of a sacred falcon, through which you send fiery heat into the air. In the parts towards the west, you have the shape of a crocodile with the tail of a snake, from which you send out rains and snows. In the parts towards the east, you have the form of a winged dragon, a diadem fashioned of air. There's several other spells that reference the dodecaoros in the PGM, other than the one that I just mentioned. We also have a spell to establish a relationship with Helios, PGM 3, 494 to 611. The spell is very similar to the Helios consecration and also calls on the animal forms of the sun and the hours. The spell is not as well preserved as PGM 4, 1596 to 1715, but the text we do have also includes associated trees, stones, and creatures of the land and sea. There have been some mistakes in the translation. Master Sync believes that the word for lobster or crayfish, as it's been translated in the Betts version, should actually be beetle, like scarab beetle. The spell also starts the first hour with Capricorn instead of Aries. Aries is the spring equinox, Capricorn the winter solstice, and the start of the Roman year. In the binding love spell of Astropsukos, you have 4 animals of the dodecaoros that are displaced into the 4 cardinal points and described as the forms of Hermes. A love spell of attraction. In both PGM 4, 1644 to 1695, and this one, PGM 38, 1 to 26, the system of the dodecaoros is arranged according to the positions of the sunrise and sunset. Furthermore, several animals of the dodecaoros appear in a system representing the 4 forms of the sun and the 4 cardinal points. The 8th book of Moses. Note the reference to rising together, followed by 2 of the animals of the dodecaoros. He who appears on the boat rising together with you is a clever baboon. He greets you in his own language, saying, "You are the number of days of the year, Abersax." The falcon on the other end of the boat greets you in his own language and cries out to receive food. I want to make sure that I leave everyone with instructions for how to do this spell, which you will find in the handout, along with some helpful pronunciation videos on YouTube, courtesy of Baal Cadmon. Here are some suggested uses for the spell based on my personal experience and feedback from others. Object empowerment. The stated purpose of the spell in the text is to consecrate a stone or phylactery. I have personally used the spell to consecrate PGM phylacteries and also plaques and amulets based on the Cairo zodiac, also known as the tabula dorasi. Unsurprisingly, in all of the cases, they have exhibited results that I would associate with solar magic, including but not limited to things like fiery protection, inspiration and revelation, and confidence. I've additionally experimented using this to consecrate Solomonic pentacles outside of the day and hour I would usually use for making the pentacle, and it did work, though the spirit seemed somewhat rowdier and more excitable than I'm used to from Solomonic pentacles. Charitation. As mentioned, a charitation spell is a request for favor and various boons. Give me all the good stuff. When I first posted about this spell publicly, I referred to it as a road opener because of the opportunities the solar favor brings. This is a much more accurate term. As a charitasian, this could be self-targeted. I know folks who have implemented this as a daily practice and listened to their feedback about the gradual improvement in many areas of their lives. It can also be used for blessing others. The first time I used the spell to improve the situation of another was a case where things were going wrong in many areas. I wanted to test the spell to see if I could improve all of those things at once. Adding to the power of the spell, I timed it to end at sundown and drew on the Egyptian custom of associating the manifestation of results with the motion of the luminaries by saying that the sun would not rise unless these results manifested. Of course, the sun rose again the next day, and my requests also manifested the next day in all requested areas. I don't always use this phrasing, but I'll never forget how impressively that worked. Requesting a solar familiar. During the pandemic, I finally got around to trying out some ideas for which I had previously not made time. One of those ideas involved creating a solar-themed shadow box using this spell to consecrate it and adding a petition to Helios to send me a familiar that could do certain things for me, including helping me learn about the magic of the PGM. Establishing a relationship with Helios. As mentioned in the presentation, there is another very similar spell in the PGM that is a spell to establish a relationship with Helios, PGM 3, 494 to 611. Therefore, it is likely that the spell can also do that for folks who do not already have a relationship and would like one. I hope everyone found this presentation informative and inspiring. Everyone is welcome to come to the PGM study and practice group if you would like to discuss your results, and it is an excellent place to find out more information about the Greek magical papyri. The group admission question, PGM stands for either Greek magical papyri or Papyri Graecae Magicae. And that was my presentation. I am a full-time scholar and practitioner of magic and the proprietor of Practical Occult.
Thank you so much, Alison. This was absolutely brilliant talk.
Thank you so much.
So I will just republish the handouts quickly for whoever didn't have access to them, just in case. Here you go. Please message me privately if anybody doesn't have access to them. Now, Karen, have you received the handouts? Are there any questions? Now, I don't see any questions so far. Sorry. So people, in the chat box, you should find the PDF handouts. I will resend it one more time, just in case. You should find it in the chat box. And Alison, this is really great. I actually am wondering a little bit more about different applications of this, and most notably how you can incorporate them into more complex rituals. Because you could be doing this for yourself, you could be doing this for another person. Then I'm also imagining how these could be incorporated in more global rituals in the way that was briefly mentioned in the previous talk. So more in terms of, dare I say, political magic or global magic. And I was wondering if maybe you would have any thoughts on that.
Regarding political magic, I would say that I have, not this spell in particular, but I have used solar magic to target individuals and ask that their dark secrets become revealed. So this is extremely good when targeting politicians. And it's also one of those things that's a kind of no harm, no foul spell. Because if you target someone and they don't really have dark secrets to come out, that's not really going to do anything. But if you do have someone that's, hiding a lot of nastiness or scandals or whatever, this could be really devastating.
That sounds great. Looks like it could be very needed these days. So I have a question here from Natasha, asking if there is a guide to pronouncing the barbarous names.
It is on YouTube. Bal Kadmon has kindly made one, and the link to that will be found in the handout PDF.
Okay, excellent. So the link is in the handouts. And Bastien is also asking if preceding this invocation with the stele of Jeu would help.
I very often do, or at the very least, the formula of it, but it also stands alone. So there's no need to include any other spells, though experienced practitioners of the PGM very often will string multiple spells together, or take a part from one spell and put that at the beginning, and then launch into another one. So there's a lot of ways that you can combine these.
Shane is also asking if you notice any difference in these rituals based on dignities of the zodiac or accidental fortitudes.
I don't know yet. There needs to be a lot more testing of this. As far as I can tell, it seems to work equally well whenever I do it. So, I've been doing it for a few years now. I've done it at various times of the day and night, and it all just works. So I would have to have more data points to see if it's working differently certain times of the year. However, I definitely would love to hear people's feedback if they do use it. Please come to the PGM study and practice group and let us know how it worked for you. And that way, when we have a lot of different people doing the same things and talking about what results they're getting, that's how we can move forward with this magic.
100% agree. I would actually just, out of mischief, really, not that I would ever try it, I don't think so, but I wonder how this would work on a solar eclipse. Just wonder, wondering what could happen.
I have not done this on a solar eclipse, but I have done the Stele of Jew, which is another spell from the PGM during a solar eclipse.
How did that work out?
It was fine. Like, it didn't seem any different.
Okay. Are there any other questions for anybody who is still not managing to find the PDFs? I will make sure that these are sent to you by mail privately, so that everybody has access to everything. Corey is asking what sort of benefits might an artist receive from these invocations?
Well, fortunately, I have tested this with a particular composer, and also myself while I was writing this presentation. I actually myself have an amulet that is based on the Cairo zodiac, and I consecrated it with this spell, and then I wore it while I was writing this presentation. And when I was wearing it, it seemed to kind of break through my writer's block, because there were certain points where I just didn't know how the presentation was going to flow. But when I put on the amulet, it really seemed to be working better.
Okay.
So, inspiration, creativity.
Yep, that makes sense. Okay, well, thank you so much, Alison. I'm just going to put it here. Everybody who's looking for the PDF still can't find it in their chat box. Please send your email address to me. I see that Anne-Marie has already done it, so that I may ensure that those PDFs, that this PDF is sent. And apart from that, thank you so very much, Alison. This was absolutely brilliant. And I guess we'll see you for the rest of the seminar.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you. Now, I'm just going to copy those email addresses real fast and stop the recording.